Enjoying the view? She said it from about 4 feet behind me, in the voice she uses when she has caught somebody doing something and intends to make a small meal of it, and I did not turn round, and I said, "Only since you got here." I want to be clear about the next 4 seconds because everything in this story comes out of them. I had not decided to say that. There was no plan. It came out of my mouth in the time it takes to breathe out, in the flat, pleasant tone of a man commenting on the tide, and by the time I understood what I had done, it was already in the air between us, and the tide was still going in and out like nothing had happened. Meg did not say anything at all. That was the worst part. 11 years of a woman who has an answer for everything. And she stood 4 feet behind me on a beach in July, with a towel over her shoulder, and said absolutely nothing. I should describe what I had been doing since the whole thing turns on it. I was not looking at the sea. I had been standing at the tide line for about 6 minutes, ostensibly checking the light, which is a thing photographers say and which is occasionally even true, and what I had been doing for at least 4 of those 6 minutes was watching Meg Blythe fail to get out of the water with any dignity. She swims badly and enthusiastically. She has done for 11 years. There is a specific sequence, the standing up too early, the wobble, the small private grimace at the stones. And I have watched it every July since 2014, and I have never once managed to look away from it. So when she said enjoying the view, she was not being coy. She had caught me. She knew what I'd been looking at, and she was going to make a joke of it the way we make a joke of everything. And the joke was already half formed on her face. And I said the true thing instead, in the voice of a man discussing the weather, and the joke died on her face in real time. I'm Micah Pike, 33, and I take photographs for a living. Weddings mostly, some commercial work, a lot of driving. There are 8 of us, and we have gone to the same stretch of coast for 11 years. It started as a university thing, and it should have died like university things do, and it did not, because Jean Nolan books it in October every year with the discipline of a woman running a small army, and because at some point around year 4, we all quietly understood that it was the best week of our year and stopped pretending otherwise. Same house, same 6 bedrooms and a sofa bed and an argument about the sofa bed, same 3-mile beach, same photograph on the last morning, which I take on the same rock with the same camera, and which is now 11 photographs on Jean's wall in chronological order. I should introduce 3 of them properly, because they are load-bearing, and you can take the rest as furniture that talks. Jean Nolan is 41, 7 years older than the rest of us, and she books the house every October with the discipline of a woman running a small army. She has done it through a divorce and through her father being ill. Nothing in that week happens without her. Kit is a paramedic and is the only one of us who can be relied on in an actual emergency, and who therefore treats all of us with a level of contempt we have earned. Sully doesn't talk much and knows everything. And when Sully does say something, it is generally the sentence everybody else has been avoiding. There are 4 others. Levi cooks on Tuesdays with an ambition that has never once been matched by the equipment in that kitchen. Dot cries at things. 2 of them are married to 2 of the above and have earned their place over a decade of being reliably good company. In 11 years, 4 house moves, 1 divorce, 2 funerals, and a stretch in 2020 where it did not happen at all. That week has been the fixed point. There is a group chat that has been running since 2014 and has never gone more than 9 days quiet. You need to know that. Everything I did later, I did because I knew exactly what was on the table. Meg Blythe has been in that group for all 11 years and has been my closest friend for 9 of them. She teaches art at a comprehensive. She is the only person I have ever met who will tell you your work is not good in a way that makes you want to go and do more of it. She talks to dogs in a voice she does not use for people. She has an entirely unearned confidence about tides and has twice had to be retrieved. The friendship is 9 years old and I can date it, which most people can't with a friendship. Year 2, the Thursday, 4 of us walked back from the pub and the other 2 went ahead, and Meg asked me why I'd stopped doing my own work. Not conversationally. She'd noticed that I'd had a folder of things on my laptop in year 1 and hadn't mentioned it since, and she asked, and she did not accept the first two answers I gave her. The third answer was true, and I had not said it out loud to anybody. She listened to it on a coast road at 1 in the morning and then said, "Right," and did not offer a single piece of advice, and 3 weeks later a book arrived at my flat with no note in it. That's the entire origin of it. A woman asked a follow-up question. Since then, she has been the first call for every significant thing in my adult life. She read the eulogy I wrote for my grandmother and told me the second half was dishonest, which it was. I drove 4 hours in 2018 when a relationship of hers ended badly and sat in her kitchen until she stopped shaking. We are not people who see each other constantly, 6 or 7 times a year plus the week. That is one of the things I have had to explain to people since it was not proximity. It was 9 years of somebody being the person you tell things to. And I have been in love with her since roughly the spring of year 5, which I established beyond reasonable doubt about 2 years later and have never once acted on. I can tell you the exact moment I stopped being able to pretend otherwise, and it is embarrassingly small. Year 7, not the trip. A Tuesday in October. In her classroom after hours, because I'd driven over to drop off a lens she was borrowing and she was still marking. 30-odd A3 sheets on the desks, all of them the same brief, and she went round them with me and told me about each kid. Not the work, the kid. This one stopped copying. This one is doing the thing where she makes it neat instead of good because neat can't be criticized. This one has a father situation, and I'm not going to say more than that, but look at what he's drawn. 28 of them, she knew all 28. I stood in a cold classroom at 5:30 in the evening and understood that I was going to spend the rest of my life comparing everybody to a woman who could look at a bad drawing and see the whole person behind it, and that this was going to be an enormous problem. I drove home and did not say anything about it for 6 years. Here is why, and it is not abstract. When I was 26, I told a friend called Cass how I felt about her. I did it properly, which is to say I did it badly. I did it in a kitchen at the end of an evening, having thought about it for 4 months. And I said it clearly. And I did not put a joke on the end of it. She was kind. I want to say that first because in every version of this story I have told myself since, the temptation is to make her something she wasn't. Cass was kind. She said no in the gentlest available way, and she said it immediately, which is the correct thing to do, and she said she wanted nothing to change. Everything changed. Not that night, not that month, but she stopped texting first, and then she stopped coming to things when she knew I'd be there, and I noticed and did the worst possible thing, which was to be extremely relaxed about it, which she read as coldness because it was coldness. I want to be precise about the mechanism, because I have had 7 years to work it out, and I got it wrong for the first 4. I told myself for a long time that Cass ended it, that she couldn't handle knowing and withdrew. That is not what happened. What happened is that I could not be in a room with a woman who had said no to me and behave like an ordinary person. I became careful. I stopped telling her things. Because telling her things was the currency, and the currency had been rejected. I answered her messages 11 hours later instead of 11 minutes. She did not withdraw from me. She withdrew from a man who had gone strange, and any reasonable person would have. By the following summer, we were 2 people who had once been close and now sent each other happy birthday. I have not spoken to Cass in 7 years. She lives in the same city as me. We have 11 friends in common. I know from those friends that she is well, that she has a daughter, and that she asked after me at somebody's thing in 2021, and I did not do anything with that information. That is not a fear. That is a documented outcome. I did the experiment once, and I have the result written down. So when Meg Blythe went quiet on a beach, I already knew exactly what was coming, and I got there first. Sorry, that came out wrong. Did it. I meant I made a gesture at the sea, which was a genuinely pathetic thing to do and which we have both referred to since. It's a nice beach. You're on it. Statistically, the beach improves. Meg looked at me for slightly too long. Statistically, she said. Statistically. And then she went and got in the water, and I stood on the sand for about 90 seconds with my heart going like a bird in a box, And then I went and got the camera, because the camera is what I do instead of having feelings in public. We had 4 days left. I want to describe those 4 days, because they were the strangest of my adult life and nothing happened in any of them. We did what we do. There is a rhythm to that week that has been the same for a decade. Jean cooks on the Monday, Levi does the Tuesday, and it is always too ambitious. We walk the 3 miles to the point on the Wednesday. Somebody suggests a boat, and it never happens. And underneath all of it, for 4 days, Meg and I did an extremely careful dance around a sentence. She did not bring it up. That is the thing I want on the record, because I have thought about it a great deal since, and I understand now what it cost her. She had been handed something at last on a beach after 9 years, and she gave me 4 full days to say it again on purpose, and she did not once make me. I did not say it again on purpose. Instead, I got funnier. That is my method, and I would like it noted that I am aware of how transparent it is. When something gets close, I become extremely entertaining, and I was, that week, at the absolute top of my game, and by Wednesday, Meg had stopped laughing at any of it. There were 3 moments in those 4 days, and I remember all of them. The first was Monday night on the sofa, everybody else in the kitchen. She said, "Are we all right?" And I said, Why wouldn't we be?" Which is not an answer, and which we both knew was not an answer, and she looked at the television and said, "No reason." The second was Tuesday, in the queue at the shop in the village, and she said absolutely nothing, and neither did I. And we stood in a queue for 6 minutes in a silence that had never once happened in 9 years. The third was Wednesday morning before the walk. She came down and I was making coffee, and she stopped in the doorway, and I watched her decide something and then unmake the decision, and she said, "Is there enough for 2?" There was. I made her one. She took it outside. Every single one of those was a door, and I closed all 3, and I did it in the friendliest way available. And that is the part I have had to be most honest about since. I was not cold that week. I was warm. I was delightful. I was for 4 days an extremely charming wall. On the Wednesday walk, she fell back and walked with Kit for 2 miles, which she has never done in 11 years. I photographed the point. 41 frames of a headland I have photographed 11 times. I have looked at those frames since, and they are the worst work I have done in a decade. And every single one of them is composed slightly left of center, because the whole time I was watching a woman in a green jacket walking 2 miles behind me with somebody else. Jean found me on the Thursday night. I was on the back step with the camera in my lap doing nothing at all, and she came out with 2 glasses and sat down without asking, which is what Jean does. "You've been odd all week," she said. "I've been fine, Micah." She drank some of hers. "I've watched you take that camera out 11 times when there was nothing to photograph. Something's happened, and I'd like to say something about it before it goes any further, and I'd like you to let me get to the end." I did not say anything, which she took as permission. "You and Meg." There isn't a me and Meg. There is nearly a you and Meg, and I've been watching it get nearer for about 3 years, and this week it's got a lot nearer. She put the glass down. "Micah, don't do this to us." I want to describe how that landed, because it did not land as an attack. It landed as a gift, and that is precisely the problem. And it took me 11 days to understand it. "This week is the best week of my year," Jean said. "It has been for 11 years. It got me through 2019, and it got me through my dad. And there are 8 people in that house who will all tell you a version of the same thing." She was not being dramatic. Jean is never dramatic. And it works because it's balanced. 8 people and no couples. The second there's a couple in it, it's a different thing. And if the couple goes wrong, it's not a thing at all. It's a group text that goes quiet. I know. I had a group before this one. She said it to the garden rather than to me. 9 of us, from my first job. Went on for 6 years. 2 of them got together and it lasted 14 months, and when it ended, everybody had to pick, and nobody said that's what they were doing. They just started organizing things in 2 different messages. She turned the glass. "I'm 41, and I have 2 friends left out of 9, and I didn't lose them in a row. I lost them in a slow fold over about 18 months, and I could see it happening, and I couldn't stop it." "Jean," I'm not saying that's what would happen. I'm saying it's what I've seen, and I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't frightened of it. You do know. That's why I'm saying it to you and not her. She stood up. I'm not telling you what to do. I'd like it on record that I'm not. I'm telling you what's in the room, because I don't think either of you has looked at it, and I've been looking at it for 3 years. She got to the door and stopped. And Micah, for the avoidance of doubt, if you two work, I'd be delighted. I've thought you'd be good for about 6 years. She said it flatly, like a note in the minutes. I just wanted you to know the size of the bet before you made it. That's all this was. She went in, and I sat on that step and felt, and this is the shameful part, the part I have had to be honest about, I felt relief. Because Jean Nolan had just handed me a reason. A good one. A generous, socially unimpeachable 8-person reason that had nothing to do with Cass and nothing to do with me being a coward, and I could put it on and wear it, and nobody would ever be able to see what was underneath. I used it the next day. Meg came and found me on the Friday morning on the same beach, in the same place, which she did on purpose and which I did not clock until much later. I'm going to ask you something, she said, and I'd like the actual answer, not the funny one. Okay. On Monday, when you said what you said, was that true? I want you to understand that I had 1 second. Everything after this took 2 years to unpick, and I had 1 second, and I have gone back to it more times than I can count. Meg, I've been thinking about the group. Her face did something. The group. 8 people, 11 years. I was already hearing myself, and I could not stop. Jean said something last night that I hadn't thought about what it does to the balance, and she's right. If this goes wrong, it isn't just us. It's the whole thing. It's Jean's week. It's the photograph on her wall. Meg Blythe stood on that sand and looked at me for a long time. Say that again, she said, but say it as though you're not hiding behind 8 people. I'm not Micah. Her voice went once, and she got it back. I have known you for 11 years. You have used a joke to get out of every single serious conversation we have ever nearly had, and this week you ran out of jokes, so you have gone and got people. You found 8 of them, and you're standing behind them. I did not say anything. Do you think Jean is wrong? No, I think she's right. She is right. Meg wiped her face with the back of her wrist hard, like she was annoyed with it. That's what makes it such a good place to stand. That's why it's the perfect one, Micah, because I can't argue with it without sounding like I don't care about them, and you know that. That's not why I then say the true thing. She was not shouting. It would have been easier if she had been. Say the true thing and let me decide what to do with it. That's all I've ever wanted from you, and I have wanted it for about 6 years. And here is where I said the only honest sentence I managed that entire week. I lost Cass, I said. Meg stopped. I told Cass and I lost her, and it took 1.5 years, and it was so slow I could watch it happening, and I have 11 mutual friends with a woman I don't speak to. My voice was doing something I could not control. And you're not Cass. I know. But I have run this once, Meg. I have the data. And the data says that the thing I want is the thing that removes you. She was quiet for a while. Can I tell you what I hear when you say that? Go on. I hear a man saying he'd rather have 9 years of me at arm's length than risk 1 bad year. She said it without heat. And I want to be clear that I understand it. If I'd had what happened with Cass happen to me, I might be standing exactly where you are. But you're doing the arithmetic on your own, and you've been doing it on your own for 6 years, and I'm in it, Micah. I'm the other number. She pushed her hair back with the flat of her hand. You've built a very careful model of what happens if you tell me, and you have never once asked the person it happens to. I'm asking you not to make me... I'm not making you do anything. She said it flatly. You said a true thing on Monday by accident. I've given you 5 days to say it on purpose, and you've given me 8 people and a dead friendship. That's not nothing, and I'm not pretending it is, but it isn't an answer either. Okay, she said after a moment. Thank you. That's the first true thing you've said since Monday. Meg, I'm not going to do anything with it today. I need to think. She picked up her towel. But I want to say one thing, and then I'm going to go and swim, because otherwise I'll cry on a beach in front of Levi. Go on. You're not protecting me, and you're not protecting them. She said it evenly. You're protecting yourself, and you have found the two nicest possible things to hide behind, and I think you're the only person on this beach who doesn't know that. We drove home on the Saturday. 6 hours, 3 cars. Meg went in kits. I want to be honest about the 11 days after that, which is that I did nothing and told myself I was respecting her request to think. That is the second oldest trick I have. The first is jokes. Here is what I actually did in those 11 days. I worked 2 weddings, both of which I shot competently, and neither of which I remember. I did not open the folder from the trip, which I always open on the Monday, and which I have opened on the Monday for 11 years. I went and looked at Cass's Instagram, which I have not done in about 4 years, and which I did on day 6 at 11 at night. Her daughter is 3. She looked happy. I closed it and sat in a chair. And on day 9, I drafted a message to Meg that said, roughly, I've been thinking about what you said, and I think you're right, and I don't know what to do about it, which is the closest I got, and which I did not send, because I read it back and understood that it was still a message about what I don't know rather than a message about what I want. That was the correct diagnosis, and I still didn't send anything. She rang on the 12th day. I'm going to tell them, she said. You're going to what? The group. I'm going to tell them what happened on the beach, and I'm going to tell them what I want, and I'm going to ask them what they think. She was completely calm, which meant she had been rehearsing. Because you have built your entire position on what it would do to 8 people, and you have never once asked the 8 people, and neither have I, and it turns out that's insane. Meg, Jean specifically said, Jean said what was in the room. She was right, and she was kind, and she said it to you privately, and she explicitly said she wasn't telling you what to do. I could hear her moving around a kitchen. You took a piece of honest information and you turned it into a wall. That's yours, not hers. If you do this, you can't undo it. I'm aware. That's rather the point of doing it. A pause. Micah, I am 33. I have spent 6 years being extremely careful with you. I'm not going to spend a 7th being careful about a hypothetical group text. Meg, I want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to hang up, because I've got a year 9 parents' evening, and I cannot do this and that in the same day. She took a breath. I'm not doing it to force your hand. If they say what Jean said and you decide it's not worth it, I'll accept that. I'll be there in July and I'll be normal, and it will take me about 2 years and I'll manage it. That's not... But I'm not going to spend another 6 years wondering whether the only thing standing between us was a reason nobody had checked. Her voice was steady the whole way through, and I have never respected anybody more. That's it. That's the whole reason. I'd rather have a no from 8 people than a maybe from you. She hung up. She did it on a Thursday in Jean's flat with all 8 of us there, which she arranged herself and which she did not warn me about beyond a text that said, Tonight come, don't be funny. I have never been more frightened in my life, including a car accident. She stood up at the end of dinner and said roughly, I want to say something and I'd like nobody to react for a minute. And then she said it. The beach, the sentence, what she wanted, and what Micah had said about the group. I want to record what it was like to sit at that table. She did not make it romantic. That is what I had braced for, and it is not what she did. She laid it out like a woman presenting a proposal in order, with the counter-arguments included, and she said the words, and he may be right, twice. She also... And this is the part I did not expect and have never fully recovered from. She did not make me look bad. She could have. Every single person at that table would have been on her side inside 90 seconds if she had told it slightly differently, and she told it straight instead, including the bit about Cass, which she had every right to use and which she framed as, he has an actual reason, and it isn't cowardice, it's evidence. That is a far more generous account than I had given of myself on that beach. And then she said the thing I have not stopped thinking about since. He said it would wreck this, she said. And I've thought about that for 2 weeks, and I think he might be right. And I want to ask you anyway, because you're 8 adults and not a piece of furniture, and I'd rather you got a say than got protected. There was a silence of about 4 seconds that took a year off my life. Then Kit said, oh, thank God. I want to be accurate about the rest of that evening, because the version where everybody cheers is not what happened. 6 of them were delighted. Levi had apparently had money on it since 2019. which he announced immediately and which he has never been allowed to forget. Dot cried, which Dot does. Sully said one thing, which was, what happens at the house? That was the actual question, and everybody knew it. Not, are we happy for you? What happens in July? Separate rooms for a year, Meg said, without hesitating, which meant she had thought about it, not as a gesture, because if it's going to change the week, I'd rather it change slowly enough that people can say so. Sully nodded once and went back to his food, which from Sully is a full endorsement. Jean did not say anything for a while, and then she said, I meant what I said to you on that step. She was looking at me. I still mean it. There's a version of this that cost me the best week of my year, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a nice evening. I know, but I told you what was in the room. I didn't tell you to stand in it. She turned to Meg. And you've just done something I have never once had the nerve to do in 41 years, which is ask people directly instead of guessing. So, she raised her glass about 2 inches, which from Jean Nolan is a standing ovation. So we'll find out, she said. Meg and I walked to her car afterward and stood next to it for about 10 minutes without either of us getting in it. You didn't have to do it like that, I said. You could have made me look like an idiot and had the whole room. I know. Why didn't you? Because I don't want to win, Micah. I want to be with you. She had her keys in her hand and she was not looking at me. Those are different projects and only one of them survives a Thursday. I did the thing I had not done in 9 years, which is that I did not put a joke on the end of it. I love you, I said. That's not new information. It's about 6 years old, and I've been sitting on it because I did it once before and it cost me somebody, and I have been so frightened of doing it again that I found 8 people to hide behind, and I let you go and interview them. Meg Blythe leaned back against her own car and put both hands over her face and did not say anything for about 4 seconds. Took your time, she said. Can I kiss you? She took her hands down and looked at me, like she might laugh and cry in the same second, and I wanted on record that after 9 years of knowing every expression that woman owns, that was a new one. Micah, her voice was in pieces. It's been 6 years. I think you'd better. There is a version of this where I tell you it was cinematic. It was not. I stood on a residential street in October and put my hands on either side of a face I have photographed about 400 times and got it slightly wrong on the first attempt because neither of us could stop making a noise that was somewhere between laughing and the other thing. The second attempt was better. She had a fist in the front of my jacket by then, which she has since told me she had wanted to do since roughly a Tuesday in 2019. And somebody in a flat above us shut a window with real emphasis, and neither of us moved for some time. 9 years, she said into my shoulder. 9 years. You are the single most frustrating man I have ever met, and I've taught year 9 for 11 years. That's the harshest thing anyone's ever said to me. Good, she said. I've been saving it. We found out. It took about 2 years for the group to fully settle, and I'm not going to tell you it was frictionless because for the first year, there was a slight carefulness in that house that had not been there before, and everybody could feel it. The carefulness was mostly ours. That is the thing nobody warns you about. Meg and I spent that first July being so scrupulously normal that we were exhausting. And on the Wednesday, Kit took us both aside and said, "You two are being weird, and it's making everybody else weird. Can you just hold hands like a pair of adults?" Which fixed it in approximately 1 evening. Year 12, we went anyway. Meg and I did not share a room by joint decision, which sounds absurd and which was exactly right. Year 13 was normal. Year 14, there were 2 couples in it because Kit and a woman she met at a wedding had by then made the whole conversation retrospective and slightly ridiculous. Jean's fear did not come true, and I want to be careful about what that does and does not prove. It did not prove she was wrong. She was describing a real thing that had really happened to her. And we got lucky. And the difference between us and her old group is mostly that nothing went wrong, which is not a strategy. What I do think is true is that the asking mattered. 8 people who were consulted behave differently from 8 people who find out. The photograph still happens. Last morning, same rock, same camera. It is now 15 photographs on Jean's wall in chronological order. Here's what I found in the January after that beach. And it is the reason I've been able to tell this story at all. I went into the archive to pull the group shots for a print Jean wanted. 11 years of them, in folders, plus every frame either side, because I shoot 4 or 5 to get one, and I have never deleted anything in my life. And I looked at the outtakes. In the frame before the good one, every single year, everybody is settling. Somebody's hand is up. Levi is always mid-sentence. And in 11 photographs out of 11 taken by me, on a timer from a tripod I set up myself, I am looking to my left. Meg stands on my left. She has stood on my left in every one of those photographs since year 2, which neither of us arranged. 11 frames. 11 years. A man looking sideways at a woman in the half-second before he remembers to look at the camera. I sat in that room for a long time, because the thing about a timer is that you know exactly when it's going to fire. You set it. You have 10 seconds, and you spend them walking back to your spot and arranging your face, and there is no version of that in which the looking is accidental. 11 times I set a machine to record a moment, and 11 times I spent the last half-second of it doing the one thing I had spent 9 years not doing. I put them in a strip and gave it to her for her birthday, which was in March, and which was the closest I have ever come to being romantic on purpose. She looked at it for a long time. "You've had this the whole time," she said. "I've had it in a hard drive. I've never looked." "Micah." She was holding the strip in both hands. "You made this, every year, with a timer, on a tripod that you set up. Nobody made you look left. I know. 9 years of telling me you couldn't say it." She was not crying, which somehow made it worse. "And you were saying it once a year on a rock in front of everybody at 125th of a second. We married in the September of year 15 on that beach, which was Jean's idea and which she raised at the table in October the way she raises the booking. Kit did a reading. Levi cried, which nobody had money on. Dot did not, having apparently used it all up on a Thursday 2 years earlier. The photograph that year has all 8 of us in it and 2 extra and a dog. And I am not looking left in it because Meg is standing directly in front of me. Levi took it. It is technically the worst photograph in the entire series. It is soft, the horizon is off, and Sully is blinking, and it is the only one I have ever printed for myself. Have you ever found the nicest possible reason not to say the thing? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.